Hapé or Rapé, Sananga, ayahuasca. Are plant medicines a cure-all for nearly everything, or risky drugs that throw people into psychosis and ultimately the mental hospital? In this episode, we are delving into the world of exactly that: plant medicines, their uses, when they are appropriate, when they're inappropriate, the parallels and differences between plant medicines and meditation, megadosing with a relaxing and flow state inducing nootropic known as L-Theanine, my controversial take on tobacco and nicotine and my experiences with it, upgrading the meditation experience with neurofeedback and modern technologies, ancestral uses for the plant medicines and animal medicines, and everything in between. Oh, and can't forget cannabis. Does that drug fit this list of sacred and special revered plant medicines? Stay tuned and we'll cover all that and much more. Guiding us through this journey is plant medicine veteran and Planet Kambo co-founder Jonathan Gold. He left an unfulfilling 10-year career in IT to pursue a higher path of healing, self-discovery, and enlightenment, uniting him serendipitously with the transformational healing power of Kambo frog medicine. And by the way, if you want to learn more about Kambo specifically, I suggest you go back to episode number 136 that I recorded with Caitlin Thompson, where we discuss the benefits, the peptides, and other bioactives of Kambo specifically. And as we mentioned in this episode, Kambo is non-psychedelic, non-hallucinogenic, and often a great place to begin your foray, albeit a bit uncomfortable compared to some of the other plant medicines. And yes, Kambo is technically an animal medicine. Anyway, Jonathan is a skilled facilitator with thousands of testimonials and great experiences with those that join him on his retreats. The show notes for this episode and links to everything we discuss will be at mindbodypeak.com/151. And if you want to check out some of Jonathan's products, you can go to planetkambo.com, planetkambo.com, and use the code URBAN10 at checkout to save on your order. As I mentioned in the episode, I personally have their Hapé and Sananga and use their Hapé semi-regularly, but haven't got around to trying their Sananga yet. And do note that we discuss Hapé quite a bit in this episode. Hapé contains nicotine, which is an addictive chemical, so proceed with caution, do your own diligence first, and if you have an addictive personality, steer clear. This podcast episode is brought to us by the Outlier Longevity Challenge. I created this mini program because most of what I see around longevity is either complicated and confusing or extremely expensive. Some of the biggest longevity biohackers famously on record state that they spend hundreds of thousands up to the millions to slow down their biological aging process and to live higher quality years for longer. I think this is wrong, and you shouldn't have to spend a fortune just to get some of the most impactful tips, protocols, and strategies to make it into your centenarian years. So what I did is I did ample research. I've been heavily immersed in longevity for as long as I can remember, and often share what I find. To make it less overwhelming, I created a short mini course, 14 days of emails that have some theory in them and information about the research behind them. But most importantly, they're action-packed with things you can implement without taking your whole day, but little things you can do to start improving your longevity today. And if you take a biological age test, a blood panel, if you follow these short action items each day, you will definitely see a difference. So far, all the beta testers who went through it and actually implemented some of the things they learned, which aren't too difficult, they all improved different parameters of their health. So this mini course is designed to replicate a one-on-one longevity coaching session with me. And for the first 500 people that go through it, I'm slashing prices by 60%. Plus, you get a free consult with me to discuss anything that you want to discuss related to your health, well-being, personal development, longevity, you name it. So, in order to take advantage of this limited time offer, go ahead and click the link in the show notes below and use the code LAUNCH at checkout. If you have any questions, you can leave a message on the contact form on outlier.com/contact or email hello@outlier.com. Let me know what you think. I'm always working to improve it, so I look forward to hearing your thoughts and, most importantly, seeing your transformation. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, sit back, relax, and enjoy this interview with Jonathan Gold.
John, welcome to Mind Body Peak Performance.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I'm looking forward to this conversation. Let's dig into all things plant medicine and non-duality and so much more. But before we get started today, what are the unusual non-negotiables you've done so far today? It's a couple hours later over there for your health, your performance, and your bioharmony.
Wow. Okay, that's quite a question. Right. Non-negotiables that I've done. Meditation. I did an hour this morning when I woke up. That's my preferred. I find it easiest to do, actually. As soon as I wake up in the morning, my mind's already kind of peaceful from sleeping. That's the perfect time. So before I get out of bed, I usually do 45 minutes to an hour of meditation.
How do you settle on that amount of time? 45 minutes to an hour is a lot longer than most people do.
Yeah, I know. It depends how often I've done it the previous day. Ideally, I find with meditation, frequency is more important than volume, right? So if you meditate once a week for 7 hours, that's not as good as doing an hour a day. And by the same token, if you meditate once a day for an hour, it's actually better to split it up. 20 minutes would actually be better than 1 hour long session for sure, because it's the more often you you put your mind in that state, the easier it is to get into the state.
Interesting. I've heard the opposite case too. I've heard people mention that it's better to have one concentrated session because oftentimes the first 10, 15 minutes, you're just dropping in, you're like getting into the zone. And then after that, it's like where some people view the actual benefits as occurring.
Yeah, but that's where the frequency comes in, because for me is when you do the frequency, it doesn't take you 10 to 15 minutes to drop in. It takes like 1 minute to drop in. If you don't do it that frequently, then like if I'm only meditating once a day, it takes me about 35 minutes before it really clicks. And then the last 25 minutes of the hour is when it's really working. In a perfect world, when I'm really on it, I do it 3 times a day, like three 20-minute sessions a day, or maybe an hour in the morning and then a 20-minute in the afternoon and then another 20-minute before bed. If I consistently do that, it just clicks. Like I can fall in really, really quickly. But you know, it's easier. I say easier said than done, but that's why I do a long in the morning, because in the morning I'm not occupied with other stuff, so I just do it. Whereas in the middle of the day, you know, I'm doing stuff and it's like, oh, I'll go and meditate, you know. So it's but I find when I get in the zone with it, when I'm doing it regularly, it's not a chore. It really isn't. It's like you look forward to every session, you look forward to doing it. And I've just kind of got out of sync with the regularity. I always do it in the morning. But for me, doing it once a day is not enough for it to actually really do something. It's for me, like twice a day, even 3 times a day is where it's at for me.
What do you feel are the main benefits you get out of it? Because I meditate also every day in the morning, first thing. I've done little stints where it was 45 minutes, an hour, and now I'm usually around the 20, 25-minute mark. But I'm curious what you feel you get out of each session, why it's such a non-negotiable for you.
Because when I don't do it, then I notice the rest of the time throughout the day, my mind is a lot more nervous, anxious, kind of disorganized all over the place. So the benefit actually is not while you're meditating, even though it can feel really good while you're doing it. For me, it's actually the benefit comes from the space that it gives you, kind of headspace it gives you of being non-reactive to stimulus. You know, it creates space between stimulus and response. That's one of the things it does. I've heard somebody else actually describe it like that.
Yeah. What does your actual practice look like? Are you following any system or just sitting there with your eyes closed and letting your mind wander?
I just try to focus my attention on, usually just use my breath or something. It could be the feeling in my hands, it could be the breath, but it's just something to kind of to center the attention. And I mean, I can talk you through what meditation is for me. I've got this thing that I've made a video ages ago about it. I can kind of talk you through the same thing. So, in normal life, you've got objects in the foreground of our experience. So there's like thoughts, sounds, sights, all these things going on. And in the background, you've just got this stillness. You could call it deep sleep or consciousness. It's just this stillness in the background. But the mind is constantly grabbing at the different things. It's grabbing at the thoughts. It's grabbing at the sounds, and your attention is doing this all the time. It's just human nature. The mind does that. And with meditation, what you're doing is you're training your attention to focus on one thing, not all of these things all the time. So you're training your attention to sit still. I like to think of it as almost like balancing, right? So you're trying to balance your attention on a point, right? And it keeps falling off, and you pick it back up and you put it back on, and you pick it back up and you do it over and over and over again, and it drives you mad. But then when it clicks, it stops falling off and it just stays. With no effort, the attention just stays on the thing that you're focusing on, and then it clicks. And then usually when that happens, what I feel, it's almost like a blanket comes down. It's what it feels like a blanket comes down, and it feels like being in deep sleep while I'm awake. That's the only way I think to describe it. When that actually happens, and what that is, it's the changing places of the stillness in the background that you didn't notice before. That is actually moved into the foreground, and the objects that you were grasping at, they're moved into the background. So they're not gone, but the mind isn't grasping at them anymore. It's focused on the stillness in the foreground. So that's through the technique of balancing your attention. What you're doing is you're getting those two things to swap places. The stillness in the background comes into the foreground. The objects in the foreground go into the background. They don't disappear. They're still there. They just float by, but you're not grabbing at them. And when that happens, the feeling that I get, it feels like deep sleep. It's like when you wake up in the morning, when you've had a really good sleep and you've got kind of that dozy feeling. That's what it feels like when meditation is clicking. And it feels so healthy. It feels like, healing the brain.
That's a great explanation of it. It's very simple to understand. Do you have any tips for people looking to get started to make the process easier or more efficient, especially when you're starting out? I know when I was starting out, the first number of sessions felt like I wasn't making any progress. I was beating myself up for not clearing my mind the way I thought I should. And then eventually it got much easier. But do you have any tips to shortcut that process?
Well, number one is you have to accept it's going to suck for a while. You are going to hate it. It is going to feel like nothing's happening. It's going to be boring, right? It's going to feel like it's very much like going to the gym. When you first go to the gym, like you go for the first week, nothing happens. Your body doesn't change, right? It takes a long time. It's very much like that. It takes you're training your brain. You're training that part of your mind in the same way that when you do yoga, or you're training the gym or whatever it is, some skill that you're learning. It doesn't happen overnight. And even when you do it and it feels like nothing's happening, like even when you go to the gym and it feels like, well, nothing's changed, actually something has changed. It's just so imperceptible that you can't quite notice it yet. But the only advice I would give is start small, right? Even if you just do 5 minutes, do it more than once a day. That's, for me, once a day doesn't really, it doesn't click often enough. If you just do like 1 20-minute meditation a day, you'll get benefit, but you won't get to that place that I'm talking about. That amazing feeling when you get the deep sleep feeling comes, that doesn't come for me. Doing meditation once a day for 20 minutes doesn't even get me close to that. So I would say just stick with it, accept that you're going to not like it for a bit. It's going to suck. It's going to be boring, but just keep doing it. And one day it will click and you'll know what I'm talking about when it happens, because you'll feel it happening and you'll think, that was what John was talking about. Like a blanket coming down. And when it's there, it's like, oh yeah, here it is. And it feels so good.
That's a great way of describing it too. It does feel like a really restorative sleep. You just feel good during it, for at least for me. And then afterward is when I feel even better. And for me, it used to take about like 30 minutes to actually really drop into that zone and to feel like I was getting all those benefits. But then I started playing around with neurofeedback, and I feel like after, I don't know how many sessions I've done, maybe 200 sessions, I can now access that same state with only 15 minutes instead of 30. Have you played around with any technologies
Really?
to enhance?
Is that one of the things that you wear in like a device you wear? on your head. Is
Yeah,
that
so
when you say neurofeedback?
yeah, so you wear it on your head, and there's different modes you can like choose. You want to train focus or relaxation, and based on the mode you choose, it entrains your brainwaves to certain states. Well, it provides cues. It provides auditory or visual cues, and then like rewards your brain. I said in quotation marks because it teaches your brain that like, okay, when I'm sitting here in this state, then the music gets a little louder or a little clearer. And this is the state that I want to go towards. And that's when you reach that certain brainwave pattern dominance that you selected. So for meditation, it might be an alpha brainwave dominant state. And then over time, like after you do it enough times, you start to tune out the music that's even there. You forget it's there. And your brain is just like learning how to access that without anything. Because then when you take it off, you can sit down there and emulate those same brainwaves without anything.
No, I've seen them. I've never used one. I'm really intrigued to try. Actually, now I've spoken to you about it, but I know what you're talking about. Those devices. I've never used one myself. Something I've used a product like a nootropic, L-Theanine, actually is incredible. Incredible. It puts your brain in that state. I'm not actually, when it comes to nootropics, I find a lot of them, to me, feel like stimulants, and they mess up my sleep. Even when I take like tiny doses, micro doses of them, I find myself lying in bed wide awake. Even if I do it at like 5 a.m, I'm lying in bed at midnight wide awake, and I've had like the quarter of the dose. But L-theanine is obviously not like that. L-theanine is actually, when I've taken the high doses of it, it's unbelievable. I've had some insane experiences with L-theanine alone, just L-theanine, where I've taken a reasonably large dose. I'm talking like over a gram. Yeah. I mean, so the capsules I've got are 400 milligrams, and if I take 400, I mean, I take it every day. I don't really feel it. But if I was to take 3 of those, if I was to take like 1.2 grams, I have a very noticeable psychoactive effect from it, and it's very, very powerful. It does feel like you've been meditating for 12 hours.
I've never taken that before meditating, at least not intentionally like that. When I usually use it, it's like 100 to 300 milligrams in the morning, blended into my coffee because it's a natural amino acid found in high concentrations in really high quality teas, and it smooths out the effects, the tightness, the constriction, the jitters, all like the negatives of coffee and caffeine and stimulants. It helps to offset those as well as like encouraging, I think it's alpha brainwave production, which is great for relaxation and for meditation and for all those kinds of things. But I have not tried mega dosing it. That could be a cool experiment to do that on a weekend when I'm not having any caffeine or anything else to offset it, and then try a nice long meditation session. How far in advance are you consuming it ahead of your meditation?
I mean, to be honest with you, on most days, when do I normally meditate? So I meditate first thing in the morning, and then I take the L-theanine after that. If you're going to mega dose it, I would say, yeah, like if you're going to mega dose it and use it for meditation, I'd say take it maybe half an hour, 40 minutes before. Take a gram. Try taking a gram. It's not harmful. Like, it's really not harmful. Some people take it. Some people take like a gram and a half a day for months. So it's like it's not harmful to take that larger dose. I mean, I've taken it also over a longer period in higher doses, and there's definitely an antidepressant effect for sure. Like it definitely upregulates serotonin, dopamine. You feel really good on it. But then anything like that, when you've used it, when your brain gets used to these new higher levels, if you suddenly stop taking it, there's a rebound effect. It's not. I wouldn't call it like a brutal withdrawal. It was like for a day, I felt kind of agitated and a bit like brain foggy for a day, and then it just goes away.
Yeah, it's also really helpful in the evening. It can, like, again, stimulate alpha brainwaves and help you get to sleep better, especially if you've had stimulants or coffee later in the evening. It can help like blunt that effect, keeping you up. But it does also induce lucid dreaming in some people. So if you have like very intense dreams and you don't want that, it might be bad to take before sleep. But yeah, I'm a big fan of L-theanine, and I've used it in what I thought was higher doses at like 400 milligrams. But now it's going to be cool to experiment with trying really high doses before meditation in the morning, and then maybe in the afternoon or evening as well.
Also, as an emergency anti-anxiety medication, right? So if you've got, I mean, I'm trying to think of an example for me, but maybe like when there's something I've got to do, and I've had a terrible night's sleep, right? And I'm stressed out, and I need to perform. I need to be not anxious, right? You make a dose, take like 800 milligrams of L-Theanine or a gram of L-Theanine or more. You could even take more, and it's going to give you like 4 or 5 hours of no anxiety. Like you'll be fine. You might crash after a little bit, like when you take the high doses, there's definitely a rebound effect. But if you have an emergency situation where you need to be not anxious, right, and you don't want to take beta blockers, or you haven't got access to anything like that, right? L-Theanine, totally safe, really non-addictive. Then it's amazing for that. So it's always good to have some. Always good to have some in the house in case.
No, I agree. I'm with you on that. So let's switch gears a bit now, and I'm curious about your background and how you got involved in the work you do, because you do a lot more than just use L-Theanine and mix it with meditation.
Yeah, so I used to work in an office for many years. I was in IT for a long time. Ended up not enjoying it. Didn't want to be stuck in an office all day. Then I played professional poker. Actually, that was the thing that got me out of the rat race, out of the 9 to 5. Was I started playing poker online. I got good at it, and then one day I just quit my job. I was like, yeah, I can play poker for a living. And then got into plant medicines, Kambo, which I did for the first time, maybe 2010. I did it at an ayahuasca retreat, actually, of all places, and I'd never heard of Kambo, and they had it there, and I did it and felt benefit from it, and then I would do it periodically after that. So I found a practitioner who was actually in the Netherlands at the time, and I would travel there whenever, every few months to go and receive Kambo. And then in 2017, my business partner and I, we were looking at setting something up, and it just suddenly occurred to us, well, there's no professional Kambo outfit. There's no brand, there's practitioners, but Kambo to the untrained eye just looks dangerous and unhygienic, just like people burning the sticks and putting frog poison on them, which actually, it's not actually poison, but we'll talk about that later. But that's what it looks like. And to the layman, it just looks awful and dangerous. So we wanted to set something up where someone could look at that who has no idea. They're not in that community. They're not in the plant medicine community. They could look at it and think, okay, this looks legit. Maybe I'll try it. So, and a lot of people have actually said to me that that's what they like about Planet Kambo, is it looks professional. It looks legit. And and then the rest is history, really. So
there's definitely a through line between meditation and the plant medicines and even animal medicines in the case of Kambo. I actually interviewed, I don't know if you know her, Caitlin Thompson, on episode 136 a little while back, and we talked more about the bioactives and the peptides and everything in Kambo. And she stressed that this is not your typical psychedelic. It's not a hallucinogen that you would get from other common plant medicines. But she also mentioned that when she was in front of large audiences speaking about this, people would ask her what her favorite medicine was, and people were shocked that it was Kambo, and that she had thought that was the most healing and therapeutic out of all of them. It sounds like you came to similar conclusions.
I wouldn't say it's my favorite. I wouldn't put it like that. It's just like, even though I've definitely got a lot of benefit from it, I wouldn't say it's my favorite. I definitely more a fan of the kind of psychedelic medicines. Not to say that I'm not taking anything away from it, but Kambo is, it's a purging medicine, really. So I've developed a method for how to use Kambo, which is kind of based on there's something called sapo, which is what some of the Peruvian tribes call Kambo, and sapo just means frog or toad in Spanish. And when they do it, they don't drink any water. So they do it dry, right? And the way I'd always done Kambo is with water, where you drink 1.5 liters, 2 liters of water before you put the Kambo on. And then you feel so awful all the way through the process, right from the beginning. Before the Kambo even goes on, you feel sick because you've got an empty stomach and 2 liters of water in your belly. You put the Kambo on and it feels so harsh. It's just awful, unpleasant feeling. And I used to dread doing it, right? And then the first time I tried it without water was on one of our retreats in 2019, November 2019. And I'd heard about this Sapo method. There's a guy called Peter Gorman who sadly passed away recently. He wrote a book called Sapo in My Soul. He brought Kambo over in the 80s to the West, and he was very much a Sapo guy. No water. So the first time that I did it like that, I had no idea what it was going to be like. We had water on hand just in case. So I did it with some of my other practitioners on the retreat. We had water there, but we put the Kambo on dry, and within 10 minutes, I knew this was the way to do it. It feels completely different. When you don't have water in your stomach and you take Kambo, it's gentle, it comes on soft, it's slow, it doesn't feel harsh, it's completely different. And I remember in that moment, it was literally like an enlightenment, like a epiphany, when I was like, clearly this is the way to do it. Why would you want to drink 2 liters of water at the beginning? It doesn't do anything. It doesn't add to the process. It just makes you feel sick. But then I got to the point towards the end of the process where I felt like I wanted a purge, but there was nothing to come out because I didn't have water in my stomach. And at that point, I reached for the water and I drank, and immediately I purged the bile. It just came up. And in that moment, the Planet Kambo method was born, which is a kind of hybrid method of the doing it with the water, the kind of the Brazilian method of drinking the water at the beginning, and the dry Sapo method. You just drink the water later in the process. And now, I mean, I couldn't even imagine drinking 2 liters of water at the beginning. It would just be, to me, it's just stupid. It doesn't add anything to the process. And anybody that's done it this way, that's tried this way without water, everybody says the same thing. They're like, obviously this is the better way to do it. And the other thing as well, when you drink water at the beginning, is usually you throw up that water before it's ready to come up anyway, and you need to drink more. So to me, it's kind of pointless. But there are plenty of tribes that do it that way. So I'm not, this is, to me, I say it kind of seems pointless to me. But I'm a Western guy. There are tribes that have been doing it that way for hundreds of years. So there's no one right way to do it. But for me, there's a way that seems more logical and common sense and more pleasant, actually. And the other thing when you do it this way is that when you do it with 2 liters of water in your stomach, the water, to me, acts like a block in that it blocks you from really feeling what the Kambo is doing. Kambo's actually got a very subtle feeling in the body. It comes in really gently, and it can do certain things. It's kind of nuanced. It can actually even not bring on visions, but it can make you think about things. When you've drunk 2 liters of water, you feel so unpleasant that you can't focus on the actual feeling because you feel so awful and you want to get this thing over with, right? When you do Kambo without the water, it's like a meditation. It's a completely different experience.
John, will you summarize, because we alluded to the previous episode I recorded about Kambo, but people tuning in now may not have seen or heard that. And so can you describe what it is, a quick summary, and then also why people are using Kambo to begin with?
Yeah, so Kambo is the secretion of the giant monkey frog, or the Phylomedusa bicolor frog. That's the sort of Latin name. It comes from the Amazon jungle, and it has a secretion on its skin that the indigenous tribes have been using for centuries as a medicine. And the way that you use Kambo is you have to make these little burns on the skin using they use vines, or I think they're called tashimi vines in the jungle. We just use incense sticks, and you make a little burn on the skin, and then you take the top layer of skin off, and you put the Kambo secretion from the frog on the wound, and it enters the body in that way, and it puts you through a sort of half an hour to 45-minute deep purging process. So it does lots of different things in the body. It essentially puts you through a short and intense flu. That's kind of what it feels like. It's like a fever, vomiting. You might need the toilet. You might have diarrhea. So it's like putting you through the healing process the body goes through when you get sick without actually getting sick.
Very interesting. There's a lot of parallels between that and other ways people have artificially induced similar type symptoms of like sickness for or to elicit a healing response. Like there's the famous Coley's toxins where he introduced toxins to the body which had the goal of stimulating a really intense high fever, and that was able to like rid the body of certain parasites and diseases and everything. And there's like a bunch of different examples of like cultures and tribes amplifying the bodily responses. So say you have a fever, instead of suppressing it with a artificial man-made drug or even a natural plant that will bring the fever down, instead you work with it to make it more productive within safe limits and boundaries. Of course, you're not going to induce a coma by just keep bringing it higher and higher, but by making the body less hospitable to pathogens, then you're stimulating like a healing response rather than opposing it.
Yeah, that's how I think Kambo works. That's one thing that Kambo does, right? When you do Kambo regularly, you don't get sick, right? And I think the way that it works, and that's the other thing, and I'm sure Caitlin told you this as well, because I recorded an interview with Caitlin on our channel, and I asked her loads of questions about the science, things that I thought were proven scientifically, and she said they weren't. It's all theory, right? Most of it we don't know. It's just like people theorize certain things. So I was actually really surprised when I spoke to her, and I hit her with these science questions, and she just said, "Yeah, we don't know." So one of the questions I asked her was, "Why does Kambo have this effect on the immune system? Why is it when people do Kambo they don't get sick anymore?" And we don't really know, but I think what it is when you take Kambo, you're essentially you are getting sick with Kambo. It's putting you through the same process that you go through when you get sick. So if you do Kambo sort of semi regularly, you're getting fever. Say you do Kambo every 3 months, right? Every 3 months, you're putting your body through a fever. Instead of it lasting a week, it's lasting half an hour. And when you have that fever and your body flushes the bile from the gallbladder and you go through the Kambo process, you've essentially gone through a sickness without getting sick. Now, I recently got very sick, right? And I since I started doing Kambo, I could count on one hand the times I've actually really got sick. And I recently, I'm talking about just a few weeks ago, I had the worst fever I've ever had. I mean, it was awful. And I remember thinking when I was going through it, how much it felt like Kambo, actually. When I was laying there in the fever, thinking this really feels like Kambo, but except with Kambo, I know it's going to be over in 20 minutes. This went on for days.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you're feeling better now. And this makes me reflect on what we were talking about earlier and hypercompensations, because Caitlin was telling me that there are a lot of different bioactives, including many different peptides that have like immune enhancing activity and immune modulating activity. But then also the idea of hypercompensation, where it's like you introduce something strong to the body, and sometimes like, after that ends, then the body will hypercompensate and it'll go to the other end of the spectrum, upregulate your defense pathways and your antioxidant systems and all kinds of stuff like that to make it not happen in the future. It doesn't want to be disturbed. It wants to maintain homeostasis. And by introducing Kambo or other things, then you can help the body like adapt without having to spend a week or 2 weeks sick.
That's interesting. So what you're saying is when you introduce Kambo, there's almost like a rebound effect the other way in terms of your immune system. So you introduce something that's really strong and it makes you kind of sick, and the body reacts by super boosting the immune system as a kind of reaction to that.
That's what it seems. Pure conjecture and theory, but it'd be cool to see more follow up on that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, it makes sense to me.
Okay, so we've talked about Kambo a little bit, but there's also other things. You were nice enough to send me some stuff in the mail, and I have these in front of me. Can you describe what it is that I'm holding and why you decided to carry them in your shop?
Yeah, so what you're holding in the V-shaped pipe that you're holding is called a Caripe, and the little tin that you had is one of our Rapé or Hapé tins. And what Hapé is, it's a tobacco snuff. So it's jungle tobacco. This is not cigarette tobacco that's processed in like a factory with chemicals. This is like raw jungle tobacco that's been ground into a powder. It's dried, ground into a powder, and then it's mixed with ashes. So it has this kind of grey sort of texture. And then it's blown into the nose, either with like a longer pipe or with one of those V-shaped pipes, which is like a self-applicator. So you can, so for the indigenous tribes in the Amazon jungle, tobacco is actually their most sacred medicine. It's the spirit of tobacco is the grandfather, and it's actually above ayahuasca. It's like the original medicine. So it's sort of like the head honcho spirit. So tobacco is a very, very sacred plant. And for them, it's not like they don't use it in the same way that we've done in the West, where we just like make it into cigarettes and kind of, use it in a toxic fashion. The main way they use it is as a snuff. So it's blown into the nose, and it's extremely strong. Like it can knock you out, this stuff. If you do a really big dose where somebody blows it for you with a pipe, it can be incredibly powerful. It can be used for different things. It can be used. They use it for protection, actually. Like tobacco is the spirit is for protection. So they use it in ceremonies, or the shaman will use it during an ayahuasca ceremony. If he needs to clear, so like during an ayahuasca ceremony, he may feel like there's some like negative energy and he needs to clear it out. So then he'll take Hapé and he'll purge, he'll vomit as a way to clear. Because purging, similar with Kambo and with ayahuasca and with these medicines, purging is a way of like the body clearing, whether it's actually physically getting rid of something or whether it's just energetic purging. So tobacco is a purgative medicine. It's also used, it's great for meditation. It really centers the mind. They also use it socially, kind of like we do with cigarettes. A lot of the tribes people do, but it also can be used, as a sort of ceremonial medicine. So it's one of those things, like with ayahuasca, with Kambo, Hapé just kind of comes along with it. It's another one of these jungle medicines. A lot of people get benefit from it. So it was something that we decided to stock in the store. We came up with our own blends.
How many different ways is it traditionally used? Like I'm imagining it's smoked. It's also, there's like the snuff, the version of the Hapé that's under the nose. How else do they use it?
So it's smoked. They use, when they smoke it, they use mapacho, and it's used more as a smudging tool rather than inhaling. So they take the smoke into their mouth and they blow it on things to like bless, as if you were going to use like an incense to kind of cleanse. They use it like that. There's the Hapé, and then there's also you can take tobacco in a drink, like an oral mixture, which I haven't done, which is apparently horrible. And it makes you really sick, really, really sick. But you feel amazing after. I'd imagine it's probably, I think it's worse than Kambo, because when I've been given a very large amount of Hapé before in a ceremony, and it was probably one of the most difficult experiences I've gone through. It was awful, really, really bad. It's like, taking a huge amount of Hapé. It's because there's so much nicotine going in at once. It made me it floored me. Do you know what I mean? I was just rolling around the floor, then I vomited, then I was in and out the toilet like 10 times. It was really unpleasant. I would imagine that drinking tobacco is probably like that. I haven't done it, but that's another, they called it the tobacco dieta.
Yeah, that's intense. And the tobacco is much stronger when you're inhaling it like that, because it's bypassing a lot of the body's safeguards, so that it's absorbed very quickly. There's a very high spike in nicotine concentration in the brain, and the subjective effects of it. I've used it a handful of times, and it is intense. I noticed that. Yeah, I guess, what do people notice from using it? I'm curious how my experience compares.
I would say the main thing is it centers you. It's really good. It shuts off that kind of monkey mind, and it just when you take Hapé, you just come. It grounds you, because tobacco is like earth, so it's very, very grounding. Other people have reported benefits, like psychological benefits, less anxiety. I mean, some people more anxiety because it is a stimulant. You know what I mean? It's like somebody smoking loads of cigarettes, right? If you're not used to it, it can make you a little bit anxious because it's quite a lot of nicotine. So it can also be quite cleansing for the nasal passages. The only problem with Hapé is you've got to be very careful that you don't go into chronic use. because it has got nicotine in it, so it can be addictive. So it's one of those things where you just have to keep yourself in check, because if you're someone that could just get addicted to smoking easily, it kind of has that quality to it. So for me, I think Hapé is much better to do it less frequently in a higher dose where you get a really strong effect. If you do it multiple times a day, just little bits, it's going to become like cigarettes. So you have to have some discipline with that.
What would you say the threshold is to prevent it from becoming a regular habit? For me, my rule is to never do it multiple days in a row. In fact, I usually use it like less than once per week. But like, where would you say, like, where's the limit you wouldn't want to cross?
I think everyone's different. Some people could use it maybe like once a day and they're okay and they could just stop. Some people can. I certainly, for me, no. I think even if I used it once a day, I'd start to get the craving for it. I would say if I just had to pluck a figure out of the air, maybe 3 times a week. If you use it 3 times a week, right, and you're having days off in between, I think you'll be okay. But like if you're like yourself, if you're using it once a week or less, then you're totally fine.
When I use it, like say 3 times a week, even then I notice that I start to build a tolerance pretty quickly to it, and I do not get the same effect from the same dose. So I figure, why? I don't see much benefit in this, so I might as well just space it out even more.
I think a lot of plant medicines kind of work like that. I know that's definitely the case with cannabis with people. Is chronic cannabis use, people, they're just high all the time. Then if you don't have it for a few months and then you have some, it absolutely blows your head off.
Yeah, before we go on, I want to underscore one thing. And if we look at like a lot of the longest lived populations around the planet throughout antiquity, there a lot of them use tobacco, and they use tobacco a lot. But the difference is the quality. We're going out of the store and picking up a pack of commercial cigarettes. They were sprayed with radioactive isotopes and contained formaldehyde and hundreds of different chemicals. And it's very evident if you actually like were to burn the two side by side, like a good, clean, wild harvested, wild forage, whatever it is, tobacco versus what you buy in the store. Like one feels and tastes completely different than the other. And we have a volcano vaporizer here, and we have some herbal spirits that we'll use that are like different blends. And we have some of the really clean tobacco, and we use that actual leaf. Even though I have like the genetic predispositions towards higher propensity for nicotine or tobacco addiction, I can do it 3 days in a row, 4 days in a row, 5 days in a row, and then completely stop cold turkey without even like the slightest like desire for it, like completely forget about it. But in my younger years, when I lived in Spain, I tried to fit into the local culture, and I smoked their commercial cigarettes, and it was not at all the same experience for me. When I started that, I got hooked, and eventually I kicked it, but it was night and day different. And the real differentiator there for me was the cleanliness, the quality. And of course, like, still do your diligence. Anyone listening in, I wouldn't recommend you just pick it up and experiment with it. It's still playing with fire. But no, the quality, as with everything, really determines the effect, whether it's positive or can be positive or very negative.
I think also it's the intention, and if you treat these things as medicines, right, then with respect, and you use them as medicines, then they work as medicines. But if you just start to use something chronically because it makes you feel good, like with smoking, it's just a dopamine, it's the reward thing that it gives you. And it's similar with cannabis, right? Cannabis is very. I used to smoke it every day years ago, and you're not really using it. It's just, it's using you. You're just getting high. But actually, I've had some incredible experiences with cannabis. Like in terms of like insight, most profound insights I've ever had. Some of the most profound have come from cannabis, even more than like some of the psychedelics. Actually, cannabis is an incredible teacher. But it's just that it's abused. People just smoke it like cigarettes, and really, it's actually an amazing teacher. But it needs to be treated as such.
I have dabbled with it here and there, and my experience has been all over the place. I've had like really profound experiences with cannabis, and then also like some very negative experiences. And I found one thing that generally helps is when I get a full spectrum hemp product that has all of the other cannabinoids and phytonutrients, xenonutrients in it, and I combine that, then it offsets and balances the levels of THC that are ubiquitous in commercial cannabis these days. And like the whole experience is different. I don't feel the same hangover the next day either. And I just feel better and more clear while I'm using it also. So that's one thing to note, that the composition, I guess in a way, quality again, makes a big difference with cannabis as well.
And one thing I would say as well is I used to smoke it with tobacco, right? And then I stopped. So I was using it chronically for a long time, like 13 years. I smoked it every day, and then I stopped completely. I didn't touch it for 5 years. When I went back to it and used it as a medicine, I used it. I would not smoke it. I would vaporize it, and I wouldn't mix it with tobacco, and it's completely different. Tobacco actually contaminates it. The feeling gets contaminated with the feeling of the smoking, and actually makes it addictive. Makes it really addictive when you combine those two things. So if you use cannabis in a vaporizer without tobacco, it's a much cleaner feeling, and obviously not smoking it as well. Vaporizing it on its own is the way to do it. For me, if you're going to use cannabis and you're going to sort of smoke it or vaporize it, vaporize it. Don't mix it with tobacco. And then also, what you find is you use way less. Right? If you're smoking it, people enjoy smoking a joint. You know what I mean? They're going to smoke, like they're going to fill a joint up like that big, or maybe have 2 or 3. You put some in a vaporizer, you have 1 or 2 hits, you're good for a whole evening. You know, it's a much better way to do it.
And one thing that stood out for me is I've noticed that depending on my circumstances, where I am in life, like what's going on around me, that in addition to obviously the strain and other like biochemical constituents, they all have like really different effects on my overall experience. Like I've had chapters in my life where using any cannabis has made me feel anxious and paranoid. And then I've had some where it's just like profound, like idea generation and some clarity and new insights. And I'm wondering if part of like the anxiety and fear and paranoia that I used to experience was around like my own personal evolution, where I was perhaps not seeing something, a part of my shadow that wanted to be seen. And that was like my body's way of like exposing that to me. Complete conjecture and theory also, but it seems to me that there's probably some kind of significance to the side effects and unwanted like symptoms that so many people experience when they use cannabis.
And this would not just cannabis, all these plant medicines. What they do is they don't create a new problem. They put a magnifying glass on what's already there, right? So if you know what I mean, if you've got anxiety issues, right, and you take psychedelics, they're going to come up. You're going to have to fight. That's what they do. It's like, this is how you process this stuff.
That's what it was for me. I think it was just a magnifying glass because I'm not an anxious person. I don't really feel anxious throughout my day or life. And I would specifically avoid cannabis because it would induce those feelings. And that's what makes me think that there's like a message there. And it might not necessarily be about like anxiety in general life or anything, but something that I needed to confront. And I seem to have confronted it because now when I use it, no matter the strain, the THC content, whatever, most of my experiences are positive and enjoyable without that clouding of paranoia.
I had an incredible, I would call like a mini awakening on L-Theanine recently. It made me see this, like what you could call the present moment or whatever, this as a singularity, right? So the illusion of being a separate person moving through an environment with other people, right, which is what the mind, generates that. I suddenly saw this as one singular thing, and the future and the past didn't exist. There was just this singularity. And I realized all of my worries and all my stresses, all of them have nothing to do with this, with the singularity. They're to do with other ideas. They're not actually to do with this because they can't touch this because this is already full up and complete. So I know if somebody's never heard this stuff before, it's going to sound just like gobbledygook, right? But it's like for people that are into like spiritual kind of enlightenment stuff, they'll kind of know what I'm talking about. It's nothing new, right? I kind of knew that already, but I got it on a visceral level with L-Theanine. I really, really felt that there was no past, there was no future. It was all in my mind. And all that there is just this singularity, almost like this bubble, whatever you want to call it, of experience, was all that there was.
To me, that's what wisdom is, though. Wisdom is the crystallization and embodiment, the felt visceral experience of knowledge. Because knowledge is one thing. We all know so many different things, but until you actually feel it, it doesn't stay with you. It doesn't have this like lasting effect. It's just like intellectual. And I'm thinking about it as each of the medicines, the practices like meditation, each of these give us different perspectives, different views on objective reality. It gives us like more vantage points, a better, clearer picture of what it is or what the potentials are, instead of just going through life and going forward with a linear perspective. This is what I see. This is how I relate to and understand it, and therefore, like, I'm fixed in my ways. Like the more you incorporate these other things, the more you're able to see, okay, I have these like, very strong beliefs, but when I look at it from this perspective, they don't hold as true. So perhaps there's something deeper than what I initially thought. And you can get confirmation by using multiple tools available to us.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Well, speaking of tools, we haven't touched at
Yeah.
all on this one I have in front of me.
Ooh.
I have not tried this. I've been
You haven't tried it yet? Okay.
honestly a bit nervous to try it because it sounds like a very intense experience.
Sananga, yeah. I really like Sananga. A lot of people hate it. It can take you on a journey. It's so what it is. Sananga is, it's like a tea. It comes from a particular shrub, the bark of a tree, and we get it as like a powdered bark. And what we do is you mix it with hot water, and you make it into like a brew, and then that's essentially strain it. And then we also add colloidal silver, which is like a strong antibacterial. It's also a preservative. So when we add a little bit of colloidal silver to the Sananga, it means that it lasts for sort of 3 to 6 months in the fridge. When they make it in the jungle, they just make some and they use it, and then the rest they throw away because it will lose its potency within days. So anyway, it's like a boiled plant mixture that's been strained, so there's no bits in it. It's sort of got clear liquid, and it's an eye drop, right? And it stings. It stings like you wouldn't believe. But the key to Sananga is you've got to be able to just relax into it. If you really resist it, it's going to be very, very uncomfortable. But if you could just relax and breathe and just like similar to Kambo, right? You got to let it in. If you fight it, it's just going to be uncomfortable. You kind of relax and you let it in, and then it really can like take you on a journey. And actually, with Sananga, I feel it. I actually feel it through my whole body, even though it's like an eye drop. There's a real energetic feeling. It kind of flows through me.
Yeah, some of my friends have been telling me that the key, as you just mentioned, is to really just relax into it. It's like, okay, well, something painful goes in my eye. I'm imagining a lime times 10 squeezed into my eye. Relaxing into that sounds pretty difficult. But then what is the reason people use this? Like, what is the traditional use of it? And what do like people experience who aren't in the Amazon, who are just like living a relatively normal Western life? Like, why would they implement this?
Yeah, so in the jungle, it's used as a medicine for the eyes. So any eye problems, they use Sananga for, and it's also used as a sort of cleanse that part. You know, the kind of third eye area, it gives you the foresight, that kind of thing. It's said to enhance that as well. So it's kind of as a tonic for the eyes, and also as a third eye opener, kind of cleanser.
When you say any eye things, does that include problems with vision or vision deterioration?
Yeah, it works literally with vision for your eyes, and figuratively with vision for your kind of third eye, that kind of thing. So I think they also use it for hunting in the jungle, like so they use it, and then they can, in their mind, they can see the hunt, like the prey before it happens, like the kill, that kind of thing. So it's working on your vision literally and figuratively.
What's the like recommended protocol? Of course, it varies, but is it like one drop in each eye every 3 days or a week or whenever you feel called?
3 times a week. So you do. Oh yeah. So the process itself is you put a drop in the corner of each eye. So you close your eyes. You do it laying down. It's easier, or put your head back. You put a drop in the corner of each eye, and then you blink your eyes, and it goes in, and then just the stinging starts. And then you're going to close your eyes again, and then ride that wave of stinging. When the stinging subsides, then you blink your eyes again and move them around, and then you'll get another wave of stinging because more of it kind of moves about and goes in. Ride that wave, and then you just keep repeating that process until it's done. You just, when it stops, you blink your eyes, move them around, it will sting again. Usually you get 3, maybe 4 waves. Depends how much you've used. When the indigenous do it, they actually they try and keep their eyes open the whole time. I've tried, I can't. It's like, imagine having like lime juice in your eyes and then trying to keep your eyes open like while you've got it in there. It's just impossible. So as I was saying, that's the process. 3 times a week, or you can do it every day for a week, but then you have a week off.
Are there any other plant medicines we haven't discussed or plant or animal medicines we haven't discussed that you find interesting?
Oh, I'll tell you something I did recently, which was actually amazing, right? Because where I am in Poland, it's actually you can do it in a clinic. I did a ketamine. I did a ketamine infusion under a doctor's care. You can actually do it in a proper clinical setting with a doctor and it's like it's assisted psychotherapy. It's ketamine assisted psychotherapy. Absolutely amazing. I'm like blown away by how powerful a proper ketamine session is. I mean, probably one of the most meaningful experiences, like psychedelic experiences I've had. Not visual, wasn't visual at all, but insight that I got about my life and what I'm supposed to do. Things that I kind of already knew, but became very, very clear. Similar, I kind of have had this on ayahuasca as well, where you just get clarity about your life. But this was like a direct link to your subconscious, because ketamine is a dissociative, right? So you really do feel that feeling of like stepping back from yourself. And when you step back, all the clutter is it moves the clutter out the way. And then this thing comes through. It's like, oh, of course, that's right. That's what I'm supposed to do. That's how I'm supposed to do it. It's like, there you go. And it's like, that's what I'm supposed to do. And this is the way that I'm going to get there. And it was just obvious. And then later on in the experience, I touched on what I think was some trauma. So I've got, everybody has trauma, right? But we've all got childhood trauma. I've been working on it for years. I've got PTSD from my childhood, which is one of the reasons why I'm actually doing the ketamine. And when you do ketamine, the defenses come down, right? So when we have trauma, often we can't get to it because we've built these subconsciously. We've built these defenses to not allow you to get to the pain, right? When you do ketamine, and this was my only experience with it, it does feel like the walls come down. And in the experience, there was this kind of like nagging feeling in the experience I was having. And I was like, what is that? What is this? It's like a worry feeling. I'm just like, what is that? And then I just put my attention on it. And then suddenly I just burst out crying. I cried so hard in this experience. I don't know what it was that I was actually crying about. It was just the raw feeling that I was able to access. I mean, incredible. Like I felt like it opened something in me, and I'm going to do more sessions. So that was just the first one. But as a tool for therapy, amazing. I was blown away by how good it was. Now I'm not, ketamine is not something I've done much of in my life. I think I probably did it years ago, like in a recreational fashion, like when I was in my teens. Didn't really like it. When you do an infusion, right? So it's in a cannula and a needle, and drip feeding it to you for an hour. Yeah, it's completely different. But it has a very, because it's an anesthetic, right? So it has a very synthetic feel. It doesn't feel organic. It doesn't feel like ayahuasca. It's not like that. It feels very artificial, but the actual effect for people to heal trauma and get insight was incredible. I mean, I was absolutely blown away by how good it was. So, and that's another thing. These medicines, even ketamine, which is not really, you can't call it a plant medicine because it's not. But MDMA is going to be used. Either it's being used already or it's happening very soon for PTSD. I think mushrooms is starting to be used in America. Ketamine, it's the future. It's the future of psychotherapy. Is using different plant medicines and also other substances like ketamine. And you can go to places and you can get to things like get to trauma that you just can't get to without it. If someone is really, really badly traumatized, there's certain things that you'll never be able to get to, because the walls that the person has built the defenses are so strong, because it's life and death. That's what the body is doing. It's protecting. It thinks it's protecting you from death, because it feels so dangerous to go to those feelings. I believe that there'll be certain people that are so badly traumatized that they'll never be able to really get to those feelings without some kind of medicinal tool, whatever it be.
Yeah. As you were speaking, I was just reflecting on the fact that it's interesting that the primary medicines to help lower the walls and the shields are both synthetic. They're both man-made, MDMA and ketamine. And of course, there's others, but it seems to me that those are the two big ones right now.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think also it's probably because, I could be wrong in this, because they're man-made. It feels like the doctors that use them have more control over them. I don't know, something like kind of like I don't know, like iboga or an ayahuasca. It's a lot more like uncharted territory. Whereas like ketamine is an anesthetic. The doctors know exactly what it does. They've been using it for years. They're not, does that make sense? Or even like MDMA, it's also, I feel like the doctors have more experience and knowledge with it. Whereas some of these other more exotic psychedelics, it's just like they don't really know, and they haven't done enough research with them to kind of use them effectively. But I think in the future, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years, I think all psychotherapy, or the majority of it, is going to be medicinally assisted with whatever medicine that is.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure part of the reason is also that the doctors feel much more comfortable with substances that have been mechanistically evaluated. We understand like which biochemical pathways it influences, and there's a lot more like research done on these. Less human experience, maybe the same at this point, but like humans have been using other like plant medicines for millennia. But despite that, there's far less research on any one plant medicine than there is on some of the most common like man-made substances.
Yeah, I mean, I heard that they're doing at the moment, I think it's at the moment, with DMT, somewhere in the UK, they're drip feeding people DMT over long periods and letting them, kind of map out the territory. I mean, that's crazy, but yeah, I mean, even like DMT can be made synthetically, which is, I'm sure, what they've done for what they're giving people in the UK. I think the psilocybin they use in the whatever they're doing in America with it, I think that's also probably synthetically made. So yeah, I mean, and actually that it works in the same way. So I think just because something's synthetic doesn't mean it doesn't work, because some people say, oh, well, if you eat the mushrooms, right, then the mushroom spirit's going to be in it. But if it's synthetic psilocybin, then it's not. I have a feeling that it's the same. Now, whether that means there isn't a mushroom spirit or not, I don't know. Or whether it means that it's in the, you know what I mean? I'm not going to go comment on that. But I just know that when people have used synthetic versions of these medicines, it's the same. There isn't really a difference between a synthetic version and a plant version.
I would think that there would be a difference, whether it's like perceivable. I'm not sure, but like if you look at anything that you find in nature, there's never just one active ingredient in it. There might be one dominant active ingredient, but there's like other analogs of psilocybin. They might not be as psychoactively active as psilocybin is, but I'm sure if you eat the mushroom, even if it's just a fiber, all of these are going to change the way the body metabolizes the substance, and to some degree the effects of the experience. And it might not be very distinguishable to us, but it definitely has some kind of effect on a cellular level.
I think what will happen is, I think at the highest doses, if you have a breakthrough on psilocybin or on a substance, it won't matter. It like when you get to that level of experience and you actually break through, it's the dominant alkaloid is the thing that's going to be the experience. I think at lower levels, that's where the other stuff is going to come into it.
But here's the other thing. Even if you break through and that is the dominant alkaloid, there could be other alkaloids or other things in it that are going to reduce the, say, next day hangover or the side effects you feel during the experience itself. Because like that's the way things tend to work in nature when they're picked or harvested and used. Well, John, we got to start winding down because we've been going for a long time already. If people want to connect with you, they want to try some of the products you have in your shop, or just follow your work, how do they go about that?
Sure, you can check out our website. That's www.planetkambo.com. Any questions, you can send me an email. I'll answer them all personally. That's info@planetkambo.com. What else? We've got a Facebook. That's just Planet Kambo. We've also got an Instagram. We've got a YouTube channel. So there's lots of stuff going on. We run events. I run retreats, plant medicine retreats, Kambo retreats. We sell products in the store. We do training. We run Kambo training. So head over to the Planet Kambo website. There's a lot of information and things going on there. And as I said, you can always send me an email. I'm always happy to answer questions.
And I totally forgot, we didn't have time to touch on the responsible use of everything we've discussed today and to be safe about it, but that'll have to be tabled for another time. But how would you like to wrap up our episode together today?
Well, I think responsible use definitely is a really good point. That we've talked about a lot of different medicines and substances, and we're by no means, I'm not advocating anybody should go ahead and you do these things. Do your own research, right? That's another thing. Take responsibility for yourself. That's a good way to end it, right? Don't do anything that because somebody's told you. Take responsibility for yourself. Do your own research and make a decision about what you're going to put in your body or what you're going to do with your body and your mind. And that way, you'll always, you make an informed decision and you stay safe rather than just doing things because so-and-so told me to.
Well, John, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. It's been a blast chatting with you and discussing some of your experiences and the products you carry. And after this chat, I'm going to have to give Sananga a try to see if I get that clarity that we talked about. Until next time, I'm Nick Urban here with John Gold signing out from mindbodypeak.com. Have a great week and be an outlier. I hope that this has been helpful for you. If you enjoyed it, subscribe and hit the thumbs up. I love knowing who's in the 1% committed to reaching their full potential. Comment 1% below so that I know who you are. For all the resources and links, meet me on my website at mindbodypeak.com. I appreciate you and look forward to connecting with you. As a reminder, the information depicted in this video is for information purposes only. Please consult your primary healthcare professional before making any lifestyle changes.